the vets stepped up. Uncle Tobias Harris, Uncle T, Malik, they really carried the scoring load for this game. Like, what did you kind of think about that?
Yeah, I think that they had a really solid outing, the veterans did as a whole. I think it was expected that the young guys were going to take some adjusting in this atmosphere, in this environment. I mean, it's one thing to be playing your first playoff game. It's a whole other thing to be playing your first playoff game in the Madison Square Garden, when people are absolutely going crazy. So I think the level of play that they got out of Tim Hardaway Jr., Tobias Harris, and Malik Beasley was all particularly really impressive. The thing that's difficult is it's tricky because you don't really know how much you can actually rely on that throughout the course of the series. So you kind of hope if you're the Pistons that like you didn't like get like kind of get that out of the way, so to speak, for lack of better terms. But I mean, I just think the big thing, like you said, was just the foul trouble of Asar Thompson having those two fouls in less than 3 minutes. He essentially missed him for an entire quarter. And then Jalen Duren getting in really early foul trouble, essentially forcing the Pistons to really lean on Isaiah Stewart, which obviously we saw him get hobbled and kind of how that turned out. So, yeah, I think some of those jitters were to be expected, but I was really impressed with how they responded through the second and third quarter.
I was too. I've kind of come to just expect early foul trouble from our young guys, especially Duran. It's kind of just been his MO throughout the season is sometimes he just gets his hand caught in the cookie jar and he gambles a little bit too much at times. And
Yep.
I thought there was a lot of times where he just flat out gambled and didn't recover enough. And I think the Knicks are just such a good team that they're going to take full advantage of that. They're battle tested, they're veteran tested. But to have a 27-27 score at the end of one, I thought was pretty good given this team's lack of playoff experience outside of the veterans on this team.
Yeah, I thought the fact that the Pistons were able to really keep it as close as they did, throughout really the first half, but especially like you said, that first quarter of, they really came out and got punched in the mouth. They were down 8-3 at the first time out. And you could just really tell that, the level that they were at, like you could just tell that they were really needing a few minutes to actually get settled in and to get adjusted to what this environment, what this level of basketball really is. I mean, the Knicks, you got to give a lot of credit to them too, as far as the level of physicality that they brought. You could tell that the way that they were defending Cade, as far as the way that they were blitzing him and trapping him, and also just the level of physicality that OG Anunoby brought to the table was something that definitely affected Cade, especially in the first half.
Mhm.
So, the game plan that the Knicks brought in game one was definitely really effective.
I'm glad you mentioned OG Anunoby because every time I was watching, he just popped off my screen of just the way he guarded Cade. I think a lot of talk. I'm sure you saw it. There was so much talk going into this week for both sides. I mean, I've seen people like Colin Cowherd, and I've seen guys like Udonis Haslam have different takes on this series. But I think you have to tip your cap to OG the way he defended Cade, and I think the game plan for the Knicks it's not going to change. With the Pistons not really having a secondary creator and a scorer, this is where you kind of miss a Jaden Ivey because you get the ball out of Cade Cunningham's hands. You saw tonight 20 turnovers, like 7 in the fourth alone. Like I think that's a game plan that the Pistons probably don't want to repeat for game 2 on Monday.
Yeah, and I mean, whenever the Pistons have struggled throughout the last few years, but especially this season, like turnovers have always kind of been an Achilles heel of this team. So not entirely surprising to see it affect them the way that it did, but it's the turnovers, and then also it's the 3 second violations in the lane. It's the five
Mhm.
second violation right at the beginning of the fourth quarter. It's a lot of those little sloppy things that you quite frankly just can't let happen that really start to add up over the course of the game. Obviously, there was that screwy offensive interference call with Tim Hardaway Jr. in there as well. There's just a lot of things that were just, when you get to playoff basketball, things just get weird, for lack of better terms. And you have to weather the weird. And I think the Pistons, once they kind of got punched in the mouth and realized that the game was getting away from them, it was hard to recover.
Yeah, that Tim Hardaway Jr. play in particular, that was so weird because, like, the ball was halfway down, but I thought there was a foul on the call, but there wasn't, and then it was a Knicks ball, and then to your point, like, this to start the 4th, a 5-second violation, and then another turnover, and then the Knicks go on a 21-0 run, which, I know, Terrence brought it up on the live chat, watching on Twitter right now, saying, 21-0 run in the 4th quarter will hurt any team. Our young dogs learned a lot this game, and I'm glad Terrence brought that up because this is a very inexperienced team outside of the vets that they have. This is a great learning experience for them. Um,
Mhm.
I think as a Piston fan, like, if we win a game in this series, I think as fans, successful season.
Yep.
Even if they were able to play competitive ball like they did tonight, and maybe they just didn't have enough to get over the hump. I think at the end of the day, as Pistons fans, we didn't really expect a whole lot. Going into the season, obviously expectations changed when we won 40 games and fans started like really buying and believing into this basketball team. But what it's kind of like, you're just overall takeaways with that 21-0 run and like learning experiences with this basketball team right now.
Yeah, I think the level of intensity that the Knicks came out with in the 4th quarter really caught the Pistons off guard, right from the jump when they had that 5-second, that 5-second violation on the inbound pass, and then, from there, just all the different turnovers and the compounding mistakes. It seemed like a lot of times in that 4th quarter, but also in that run, the Pistons were trying to hit the home run ball and trying to get it all back in 1 or 2 possessions when in reality, they needed the poise. They needed, that's when they needed their vets to really kind of like step in and kind of like stop the bleeding there, so to speak. I think guys like, like Cade, I think he was really just trying to like, get things going and force the issue and try to make his impact felt on the game, but it wasn't necessarily in the flow of the game. And, there's just again just compounding mistakes, that cost the team in the long run. I saw people like going like, "Oh, this is on JB. He didn't have his team ready." It's like, first of all, it's one playoff game. It's one bad quarter after, you know, a really impressive second and third quarter where I thought the Pistons really for the majority of this game, I thought were playing the better game overall. So I was really impressed with with what they brought. But then I think it was just once you lost Isaiah Stewart, once you had those turnovers really just start to compile and that composure just started to slip away, the lead and, any hope of the Pistons coming back just kind of went with it. So I think the big thing is you expect this team to make mistakes, and ultimately it's about how they come back from them. As we've talked about, going into this playoff run, but also just all season long. The biggest thing about this postseason run is the level of evaluation that you're getting. And I think it's going to be really telling to see how guys like Jalen Duren, Cade Cunningham, Asar Thompson bounce back and adjust and learn from a game one. Like they like going into game two, it's not going to be an environment that's, foreign to them anymore. I think they can adjust and see things in film and apply them to the game. And, it's going to be interesting to see not only on the Pistons side, health wise with Isaiah Stewart, but then on the Knicks side, you have Jalen Brunson, who had to go to who had to go to the locker room briefly at the beginning of the fourth. There's a lot of guys on both sides that you're kind of like having to keep an eye on. So it's gonna be fascinating to see how this one develops. I think it would just be a lot easier for Pistons fans to stomach this type of loss if it hasn't been 6,172 days since the Pistons have last won a playoff game.